30 years have passed and still not a single trace. 3 women, gone from their own home in the dead of night, leaving behind nothing but silence and questions. Were they taken by someone they knew? A trusted neighbor? A stranger watching from the shadows? Or a man who had already taken lives before? Every theory told a different story. A kidnapping gone wrong, a buried secret, a crime of opportunity that spiraled out of control. But the truth? It always seemed just out of reach. Tonight we dive deep into the theories, the confessions that didn't add up, the suspects who smiled too easily, and the haunting possibility that this case may not be cold, just hidden. This is where speculation meets evidence, and where hope begins to fade into obsession. Thanks for your time you always spend to watch our videos. We greatly value your support, so please share this video with your loved ones. Do us a favor and subscribe right away, regardless of where you are watching. Let's dive into the story of the Springfield Three, 1992. Part 2. When there are no answers, the human mind reaches for explanations. In the vacuum left by the missing, theories multiply. They become scaffolding for understanding. Imperfect, sometimes fragile, sometimes dangerous. For the Springfield Three, theories arrived quickly. Some were thin and hopeful. Others were dark and plausible. Over time, the theories became as much a part of the case as the physical evidence. A map of possibility from which detectives could not escape. A web of possibilities. Investigators and the public pursued many lines of thought. They ranged from the intimate, a crime of passion or revenge, to the chillingly impersonal, a random abduction by a predator passing through. There were plans, petty grudges, and rumors of organized criminal networks. Each theory had faces and names attached to it, and each one was interrogated, tested, and often dismissed. To understand the theories is to understand how investigators thought, what they feared, and what the evidence would let them conclude. The absence of screams or overturned furniture led some to suspect that the women were lured away, perhaps knowing and trusting the person who approached them. The presence of the cars in the driveway, wallets on the floor, and phones unanswered suggested they had been taken quickly, perhaps by someone who arrived, made a single decision, and left. But without a single piece of incontrovertible evidence, a fingerprint, a confirmed phone ping, a verifiable sighting, every plausible scenario remained speculation. Revenge and known associates. Early on, detectives explored the idea that the disappearances could be connected to previous criminal activity. Suzie Streeter, before graduation, had been involved in legal proceedings as a witness in a car theft ring. Young people in that circle had been arrested. Some had promised retaliation. Investigators questioned former acquaintances, ex-boyfriends, and anyone who might have had motive or resentment. Revenge is an instinctive theory in cases where the missing person has ties to people who were wronged. It is a tidy narrative. Someone with a grievance seeks payback. It also offers an explanation for why the victims might leave doors unlocked and purses behind. They might have answered the knock because they knew the person on the other side. But motive alone does not equal proof. Investigators pursued it, interviewed dozens, ran background checks, and cross-referenced alibis. Each promising lead unraveled. Polygraphs were inconclusive, alibis held after scrutiny, and rumors failed to cohere into a single actionable suspect. Still, the theory of revenge never fully left the table. In the detective's mind, it remained a plausible starting point. Someone who believed themselves wronged, someone not afraid to use violence as a solution. The green van. If any single image became a folk symbol of the case, it was the recurring memory of a light green van, the so-called green van sightings that threaded through neighborhood recollections. Witnesses reported seeing a pale green van idling near Delmar Street, sometimes with the engine off and the windows dark. Stories placed the van at gas stations, near the convenience store where the women might have stopped, and on streets around town that night. In missing person investigations, vehicles are deep anchors. License plates, tire marks, and surveillance footage, if available, can create a chain that leads to a person. But in 1992, surveillance was sparse, and the green van remained an ephemeral clue. Tips came in. A man who had recently purchased a van of that color, a van spotted on a country road, and a trucker who swore he saw 3 people in the back of a covered vehicle heading west. Each tip revived hope and then collapsed. Investigators drew sketches, ran vehicle registrations, and interviewed anyone who owned a similar model. Yet despite their efforts, they never found the van and never tied it definitively to the Delmar Street timeline. To this day, the green van persists in conversation, part true lead, part modern folklore. An image that gives form to ambiguity. Stranger abduction, a predator passing through. Another long-held possibility was that the Springfield Three encountered a predator, a stranger who targeted them opportunistically or with preparation. Cases of multiple-person abduction by a single assailant are rare but devastating, and they can fit the facts. No forced entry, a quick operation, and victims taken far from sight. Attention turned toward men in the region known for violent criminal histories. Detectives examined itinerant workers, ex-prisoners, and military veterans who traveled frequently. They checked registries, followed trucker routes, and interviewed transient populations. A handful of persons of interest surfaced over the years. Men with violent pasts, with skills in restraint or transport, sometimes with ambiguous alibis. Each received scrutiny. One such man later drawn into the orbit of the case was a subject of much public anxiety and media attention. A man with a criminal record who lived and worked in the area, and who later made statements that some investigators found troubling. For legal and ethical reasons, investigators had to move cautiously. Without physical evidence, without DNA, fingerprints, or direct witness corroboration, they could not secure charges. And so the stranger abduction theory remained plausible but unproven. Serial offender links. As months turned to years, investigators considered whether the Springfield case belonged to a broader pattern. Were there similar disappearances in neighboring states? Were there patterns of pickup, transport, and disappearance that matched other cold cases? The idea of a serial offender, someone moving across counties, selecting targets, and avoiding capture, was terrifying but worth exploring. Detectives compared case files with other unsolved disappearances regionally. Women gone from homes or parking lots, sudden vanishings with no sign of a struggle. They worked with task forces, shared information across state lines, and even reached out to federal agencies. In some instances, investigators found disturbing parallels. Similar modus operandi, similar suspect descriptions, or overlapping timelines. But parallels are not proof. Many patterns were intriguing but insufficient to build a prosecutable case. Yet the serial offender theory forced the department to think beyond Springfield's borders. It expanded the search. Investigators interviewed truck drivers, worked with highway patrols to check rest area logs, and re-examined cold files for details that might have once seemed unrelated. Robert Craig Cox. The most controversial thread. If the Springfield case had a figure who hovered in public consciousness and investigators' minds for years, it was Robert Craig Cox. His name appears often in discussions of this chapter, not because the evidence placed him at Delmar Street, but because of the way his life and statements intersected with the anxieties of the case. Cox had a complex and violent history. He had served in the military, trained in Ranger tactics, and had a record that included allegations of violence. In the years after the Springfield disappearances, Cox became a person of interest in numerous violent crimes in different states. He was the kind of individual whose history made him hard to ignore. A skilled operator, transient by profession at times, with a record that fit the profile of someone capable of abduction. Over time, Cox made statements, both to journalists and reportedly to acquaintances, that sparked speculation. In some interviews, he made oblique remarks that sounded like admissions or boasting. In others, he offered denials or recanted. He spoke with a charisma that could convince listeners he knew more than he let on. And the lack of corroboration made his words both tantalizing and frustrating. Investigators followed him, checking travel logs that might place him in the area, examining his employment records, and interviewing people who knew him. They ran his fingerprints and DNA through databases. In the absence of a verified match or confirmed sighting, it was difficult, legally and ethically, to make charges stick. Cox's role in the narrative became a study in the psychology of confession and the danger of charisma combined with ambiguity. He was never convicted in connection with Springfield. To some, he remains the most believable suspect. To others, he is a compelling red herring, a person whose violent background and attention-seeking made him an attractive scapegoat. Abduction for transport, an organized operation. A darker theoretical possibility posited that the women had been abducted to be transported, perhaps sold, or used in a criminal network specializing in human exploitation. Such operations, while not common in rural America, have been documented in larger metropolitan hubs, and the idea of a mobile, organized ring functioning across regions gained traction in some investigative circles. Support for this theory came from a confluence of facts and fears: the efficiency of the disappearance, the lack of physical struggle, and the proximity to interstate routes that could whisk victims away within hours. Truck routes and rest stops were combed for sightings, motel registries were checked, phone records were subpoenaed. A handful of tips suggested that women seen elsewhere in the days afterward matched descriptions of the Springfield Three, but none could be verified conclusively. Organized abduction would also explain the lack of local evidence. If the perpetrators were skilled at moving victims quickly and erasing traces, then the crime scene would look deceptively ordinary. Still, investigators never found a thread of proof that could be followed to an arrestable suspect. The power and peril of confessions. Human beings who seek attention sometimes create sensational false confessions. People with pathological needs to dominate a narrative have, in other cases, claimed responsibility for crimes they did not commit. Investigators had to tread carefully between taking confessions seriously and protecting against exploitation of the case. Over the years, several individuals either hinted at involvement or were accused in the public sphere. Some later retracted statements. Others were proven to be mentally unstable or were seeking notoriety. Each false lead cost precious time, energy, and emotional reserve. Families were pulled toward hope and pushed into grief each time a sensational lead emerged, only to watch it dissolve with new information. Detectives learned to be cautious. A confession without corroboration could be as destructive as a cold lead. The Springfield investigation became a cautionary tale of the damage false narratives can inflict on victims' families and on the pursuit of truth, the evidence that might have helped, and the limits of forensics. In many modern cold cases, breakthroughs occur because of DNA, cell phone data, or small physical traces like a hair, a fiber, or a trace of soil. But in 1992, the world was less digital, and the physical evidence from Delmar Street was frustratingly limited. Potentially vital records, voice messages on answering machines, the exact placement of swept porch glass, and the sequence of who moved what, had been altered or lost before investigators could secure them. Years later, departments with new technologies re-examined whatever they could: degraded biological samples, stored evidence, and old photos. Advanced DNA analysis opened solvability in many cold cases across the country. In Springfield, however, the available samples either degraded or produced no definitive matches in databases. A potential lead through genetic genealogy, a technique responsible for solving several cold cases, remained tantalizingly out of reach because of the absence of a viable DNA profile tied to the scene or to a suspect. The human side of theory. Families, rumors, and memory. Theories are not only tools for detectives, they are also emotional instruments for families and communities. For relatives, embracing a theory can be a coping mechanism. It gives them something concrete to hold on to, a direction for grief, and sometimes a reason to keep searching. But the public appetite for narrative can also breed rumor. Unverified internet claims and sensational local reporting complicated the search. Some neighbors withdrew from curiosity because of the gossip. Others became activists, plastering flyers and making phone calls until someone returned a message promising new hope. Memory itself is an unreliable witness. Over time, recollections alter, faces blur, and languages change. Witnesses who once were sure of a detail later admitted uncertainty. Investigators had to thread memory's needle, to take statements seriously but corroborate them relentlessly. As the years passed, no single theory coalesced into proof. The suspect lists grew long and the trail ran cold. New technologies arrived, bringing renewed reviews and cautious optimism, but each re-examination met the same stubborn reality. The key piece of evidence, the one that would unlock the door, was missing. The greatest fear such uncertainty breeds is not merely the absence of answers. It is the proliferation of stories that fill the void, some comforting, some cruel. Theories help us sleep. They let us assign shapes to the nameless. But they are not justice. For the families, for the detectives, and for the town of Springfield, the job remained. Keep asking, keep testing, and keep the memory of the missing alive, even if the truth remains stubbornly out of reach. The silence of the years. Time is both an investigator's enemy and ally. It erases evidence but clarifies perspective. For Springfield, the days after June 7, 1992 became weeks, then months, then decades, and silence set in. Not the peace of resolution, but the heavy quiet that follows exhaustion. What happens to a community when the story that defined it refuses to end? 1. 1993 to 1996. The weight of waiting. By the mid-1990s, the missing person flyers had yellowed in store windows. The reward fund topped $42,000, a fortune to some, but not enough to draw the right voice. The police task force had shrunk from dozens to a handful. Detectives rotated off the case, but the files never left the desk. They were stacked in brown folders, edges fraying from overuse. Inside the department, the word Springfield needed no clarification. Officers knew it meant this case. It became shorthand for unsolved heartache. Families marked birthdays and holidays with empty chairs. Janice McCall, mother of Stacy, kept a wall calendar covered with hopeful notes. Call detective, new lead, media interview, anniversary vigil. She refused to let the routine of life erase her daughter's existence. The silence was deceptive. Beneath it, there was movement. Private investigators combing archives, psychics offering tips, strangers mailing Polaroids claiming proof. The department learned to navigate noise disguised as help. 2. The police keep the file open. Captain Tony Glenn, one of the original investigators, once said the Springfield file was never cold, only dormant. Cold means we stop caring, he told reporters. Dormant means we're waiting for something to wake it. That something was often technology. DNA databases were expanding, digital forensics was emerging. But the case had been built in the analog age, handwritten logs, cassette recordings, photographic negatives. Before anything could be re-examined, detectives had to digitize the past. Officers spent late nights scanning photos and recataloguing evidence boxes labeled Delmar Street 1992. Each box carried the weight of lives interrupted. A hairbrush, photographs, a Viz tape from graduation night. Physical relics that, even after years, still smelled faintly of a home abruptly abandoned. 3. The birth of public memory. In the absence of answers, the story itself became Springfield's inheritance. Journalists revisited the case every June. Television producers arrived with lighting rigs and polite questions. Where were you when you first heard? Do you still believe they'll come home? The faces of the missing, Suzie Streeter, Stacy McCall, and Sherrill Levitt, became local icons. Murals appeared on walls downtown. Radio stations marked the anniversary with silence at 10 p.m., the hour they were last heard from. For new residents, the story was folklore. For old ones, it was unfinished business. It shaped how parents warned their children. Lock the door, check the porch light, and call when you arrive. 4. Technology changes the game. By the early 2000s, advances in DNA analysis gave hope to cold case investigators across the nation. Small traces once considered useless. A skin cell, a partial hair root, could now yield genetic profiles. Springfield detectives sent what remained from Delmar Street to new labs. But time had taken its toll. Humidity, temperature, and early handling degraded most samples. The lab returned results marked inconclusive. Still, the process reignited momentum. Detectives reopened witness lists, re-interviewed neighbors, and searched for stored items that might have escaped earlier testing. Then came digital mapping, satellite imaging of surrounding counties. Investigators cross-referenced terrain with early search grids. New drone technology revealed depressions in soil, abandoned wells, and hidden ravines once invisible from the air. Each find was tested. Each failed to connect to the missing women. Yet every technological leap carried a whisper of faith. The future might remember what the past forgot. 5. The toll on the families. The McCalls, Levitts, and Streeters became quiet experts in endurance. Janice McCall continued public outreach, appearing on America's Most Wanted in 2020, never aging in the public mind, always the determined mother, eyes red but voice steady. Privately, the strain was immense. Marriages frayed. Friendships dissolved under the constant replay of uncertainty. Janice once told a reporter, "You wake up every day to the same nightmare. Only the calendar changes." Sherrill Levitt's relatives, too, faced a strange limbo. Without bodies, there could be no funerals, no legal closure, and no estate resolution. Even bureaucratic tasks, canceling bank accounts and insurance, required impossible decisions. To declare someone legally dead felt like betrayal. To leave them listed as missing felt like denial. 6. Community faith and fatigue. By the 15th anniversary, Springfield's emotional weather had shifted from grief to fatigue. Candlelight vigils still drew crowds, but smaller each year. Reporters noticed more teenagers attending, people born after the disappearances, carrying candles for strangers they only knew from headlines. Yet, in the quiet, an undercurrent persisted. Maybe today is the day. Each breaking news alert about discovered remains anywhere in the Midwest triggered a rush of dread, hope, and guilt. Sometimes police phone lines jammed within minutes. Could it be them? It never was. 7. The era of the internet sleuths. When the internet matured, the case found a second life. Online forums, true crime blogs, and later social media groups began dissecting every available scrap of evidence. Armchair detectives posted theories, satellite images, and even amateur reconstructions. Some insights were thoughtful, others reckless. For law enforcement, digital attention was a double-edged sword. Tips occasionally led somewhere new, a forgotten witness, a re-examined timeline, but misinformation spread faster than truth. Rumors of burial sites or confessions could go viral overnight. Detectives adopted new protocols. Any viral claim was logged, verified, and if false, quietly corrected. The internet made the Springfield Three immortal in data, but not yet in justice. 8. The 20-year mark. A city remembers. In 2012, 2 decades after the disappearance, Springfield held a memorial vigil on Park Central Square. Hundreds gathered with candles, photographs, and quiet prayers. The mayor spoke about resilience. A local singer performed Amazing Grace. Behind the podium stood 3 empty chairs draped with white ribbons, symbols of lives still unaccounted for. Reporters asked detectives whether they still believed the case could be solved. The answer, delivered carefully, was yes. Not optimism exactly, but persistence. Someone knows something, one detective said. They just haven't told it to the right person yet. That night, the city's skyline glowed orange from the candles. For a moment it looked like hope. 9. The modern cold case unit. By the late 2010s, Springfield police established a dedicated cold case unit. Younger detectives, raised in a digital world but inspired by the legends of the old case, took charge of re-examining evidence. They introduced 3D scene modeling and behavioral analysis software, mapping the Delmar Street house in virtual reality. They could now walk through the home digitally, testing sequences of movement, sightlines, and timestamps. Old audio interviews were enhanced with AI noise reduction, revealing details previously inaudible. A faint background sound, a misheard word. Each clue felt microscopic but vital. Investigators also collaborated with genealogical DNA experts. Though the original samples were weak, they explored whether touch DNA from stored items could be amplified using new polymerase chain methods. As of the latest reports, no confirmed genetic profile has emerged, but the effort continues. 10. Living with the unsolved. Today, Springfield carries the case like an old scar, healed over but still tender when touched. The house on Delmar Street has changed owners multiple times. For some, it's just real estate. For others, it's sacred ground. The families remain cautiously public. Janice McCall still attends events, her tone quieter now. When asked what keeps her going, she often says, "Because they deserve to be found." The silence of the years has not erased the women. It has only refined their memory into something permanent. In Springfield, time did not close the wound, it preserved it. Each year without answers is a reminder that justice, like grief, has no expiration date. Echoes and breakthroughs. Decades pass, but some stories refuse to settle. In Springfield, the case of 3 missing women never slipped into folklore. It lived, breathing quietly through the police files, the media reels, and the memories of those who could not let go. And every few years the silence broke with an echo. 1997, The Letter and the Lie. In late 1997, a local TV station received an anonymous letter claiming knowledge of where the bodies were buried. The letter contained directions to a farm outside Rogersville. Detectives rushed to check the coordinates, only to find the spot empty. A field of corn stubble, unremarkable but eerily still. The letter was traced to a nearby inmate, known for fabricating tips in exchange for attention. Still, the farm's soil was disturbed enough that police brought in cadaver dogs. The dogs alerted twice. Excavation followed. Nothing emerged. For the families, it was another cruel wave of hope followed by nothing. False hope, they learned, could be as devastating as tragedy itself. 2002 The Robert Craig Cox Confession. From a Texas prison, convicted kidnapper Robert Craig Cox began granting interviews. Calm, articulate, polite, a former Army Ranger turned serial predator. He claimed to know what happened to the Springfield Three, insisting they were killed and buried, but that their bodies would never be found. Cox told reporters he wouldn't reveal details until his mother passed away, a statement that felt both cruel and calculated. Detectives verified he had been living in Springfield in 1992. His job? A mechanic at a local car dealership, walking distance from Delmar Street. He fit the profile. Controlled, intelligent, and eerily comfortable discussing death. But his alibis, though thin, held. No physical evidence tied him to the house. The confession remained a riddle. Was it the truth, or just a manipulator savoring borrowed attention? Sometimes evil speaks not to confess, but to control the silence around it. 2003 The Concrete Discovery. 11 years after the disappearance, a tip surfaced that would reignite the case. A man contacted investigators claiming he'd worked construction on a parking garage near Cox Hospital in Springfield, and believed the women's remains were encased in concrete beneath the structure. He described a strange incident. Overnight concrete poured without explanation, and a car reported missing around the same time. Police faced a dilemma. Tearing up the garage would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and potentially yield nothing. Instead, in 2007, volunteer engineers used ground-penetrating radar (GPR) to scan beneath the site. The scans detected 3 irregular anomalies, roughly human-sized, 6 feet under the surface. For a moment, the entire city held its breath. But access was denied. The garage sat on private hospital property. Without a warrant or probable cause, excavation was impossible. To this day, that concrete floor remains untouched. Beneath 6 feet of cement, some believe, lies the ending to Springfield's longest story. But no one has yet been brave enough or certain enough to break the surface. The rise of the digital detectives. The 2010s brought new energy. Amateur sleuths from Reddit, web sleuths, and YouTube began dissecting the case in obsessive detail. Satellite imagery was compared to 1992 maps. Metadata was analyzed from news photos. One independent investigator, Rick Norland, revisited the garage theory using updated GPR equipment. His 2019 report echoed the same conclusion. 3 anomalies consistent in shape and depth. But again, no legal grounds existed for excavation. Meanwhile, other internet researchers dug into alternative leads. A possible connection to a transient man sighted near the house and to other unsolved disappearances in the region. Digital technology gave ordinary citizens forensic power once reserved for police, but it also amplified speculation, turning tragedy into entertainment for some. In the online age, every mystery becomes a mirror. Some look into it searching for truth, others for notoriety. The private investigator's breakthrough. In 2018, retired Detective Paul Williams returned to the case privately, using new pattern-matching software that could cross-reference cold cases nationwide. He discovered 2 eerily similar disappearances, both women taken from their homes, personal items left behind, no struggle, no trace. Both incidents occurred within a 2-hour radius of Springfield, and both predated 1992. The theory emerged. The Springfield Three were victims of a serial offender, someone organized, methodical, and practiced at erasing evidence. FBI profilers reviewed the data but stopped short of naming a suspect. They did, however, note one chilling consistency. All 3 cases occurred within walking distance of major construction zones active at the time. Again, the concrete connection. The emotional breakthrough. Even without physical answers, emotional closure began to take shape. Janice McCall, speaking at a 2020 vigil. If the answers never come, we'll still have done something important. We kept their story alive. They're not forgotten. That's our victory." Her words reframed the narrative. The investigation was no longer only about where the women were but about who Springfield had become because of them. A city unwilling to look away. The New Hope DNA and AI. In 2022, the 30-year anniversary, Springfield PD partnered with Othram Labs, a facility specializing in degraded DNA recovery. Small traces collected from hairbrushes and clothing were retested using next-generation sequencing. Results remain sealed under active investigation, but detectives confirmed promising activity. At the same time, AI-assisted photo reconstruction recreated likely modern appearances of the women, using age progression algorithms. The images were released publicly, a haunting blend of science and longing, as though technology was trying to give them faces once more. For a city haunted by what it lost, even a simulated smile was a kind of resurrection. Echoes in the media. True crime documentaries revisited the case with new depth. Disappeared, People magazine investigates, Unsolved Mysteries podcast. Each added detail, each reignited interest. The Springfield Police's tip line still receives calls. Some from attention seekers, others from people who simply can't shake a memory. Every few months a rumor flares. A new dig site, a breakthrough, a confession. Each fades, but the cycle itself keeps the women present, like ghosts who refuse to fade from the real. The 30-year vigil. June 7, 2022. At the original Delmar Street address, now owned by strangers, candles flicker along the curb. The families stand in the warm dusk, surrounded by friends, reporters, and quiet onlookers. Someone plays Somewhere Over the Rainbow on a portable speaker. Janice McCall steps to the microphone. "I still set a place for Stacy on holidays. Not because I expect her to walk in the door, but because I want her to know she's welcome." Her words catch in the wind. Behind her, the house stands still, ordinary again except for what history wrote inside it. The ongoing search. Today, the Springfield Three remain officially missing. There are no arrests, no confirmed remains, and no final chapter. Yet, for investigators, every year brings new tools, and new faith that somewhere buried in data or earth the answer still waits. The echoes persist. The letter, the garage, the confession, the scans. Each a whisper circling the same unresolved truth. Perhaps one day a single sound will break the pattern. A voice, a clue, a confession genuine at last. Until then, Springfield listens. Legacy of the lost. Every unsolved case becomes two stories. The first is what happened. The second is what we do with what happened. 30 years later, Springfield lives with both. The case that redefined missing. When the Springfield Three vanished, the term missing persons still meant flyers on telephone poles and phone bank volunteers. There were no national databases, no centralized DNA indexing, and interstate coordination was still tangled in red tape. After 1992, that changed. The case became a benchmark at training academies across the Midwest. How evidence can vanish when too many good people try to help. Officers learn new protocols, secure the scene, log every visitor, and preserve every trace. From 3 women gone without a clue came a generation of detectives who swore never again to lose a crime scene to confusion. Sometimes progress is born from heartbreak. One family's pain reshaping how an entire nation searches for its missing. Janice McCall's mission. Janice McCall refused to disappear with her daughter. In 1997, she founded the One Missing Link Foundation, a nonprofit that trains families to work effectively with law enforcement and media. She spoke at schools, police seminars, and churches, always carrying a folder of her daughter's photographs, not as evidence but as motivation. "We can't all be detectives," she once said, "but we can all pay attention." Her advocacy helped expand Missouri's Amber Alert infrastructure years before most states adopted it. Through her work, other families found structure amid chaos. From the silence of her loss, Janice McCall built a voice that still echoes in every alert, every broadcast asking the public for one more pair of eyes. The police perspective. For the Springfield Police Department, the case was a lifetime wound. Many original investigators retired carrying the same unanswered questions they'd asked in '92. Some stayed in contact with the families. Others couldn't bear the reminder. Captain Paul Williams described it simply. "It's the one that keeps the lights on at night." Each new recruit still hears the story during orientation. not as a legend but as a caution. It teaches humility, that even perfect procedure can fail against the unpredictable, that truth sometimes hides in plain sight. The city that changed. Springfield itself evolved around the absence. Neighborhood watch groups multiplied. Home security businesses thrived. Parents no longer let teens walk home after midnight. The case had become woven into civic identity, a quiet warning in the city's collective bloodstream. The annual art fair still sets aside a booth for missing persons awareness. Local reporters who once covered the search now mentor journalism students, reminding them of responsibility to chase stories, but also to guard the people within them. The ripple effect on true crime. The Springfield Three became a template for ethical storytelling. Producers studying the case learned to treat victims as people, not plot devices. It prompted national discussions about privacy, consent, and trauma in televised investigations. When streaming platforms revived true crime in the 2010s, Springfield's restraint, its empathy, stood as the model. Many modern documentaries cite it as an influence, the balance between curiosity and compassion. In a way, the Springfield Three helped shape not only how we investigate tragedy but also how we talk about it. The psychological legacy. Psychologists later coined a term, ambiguous loss, to describe families trapped between hope and grief. Janice McCall became its embodiment. She never closed the emotional door, yet she learned to live beside uncertainty rather than within it. Support groups formed statewide, uniting families from separate cases. Together, they lobbied for funding to create Missouri's Cold Case Review Board, which now re-examines dormant investigations every quarter. Out of Springfield's shadow grew an infrastructure of empathy, legislation written in memory of the missing. Media in memory. Old footage of Suzie, Stacy, and Sherrill resurfaces every few years. Graduation smiles, candid laughter, and the fragments of ordinary life. For younger viewers, they're snapshots of a past era. For Springfield, they're sacred. Each rebroadcast renews the question, could this happen again? Each reminder strengthens the answer, not if we keep watching. The community's vigilance has prevented more than one disappearance. Neighbors now act quickly, police mobilize faster, and newsrooms coordinate alerts within minutes. 3 missing women continue saving lives they never met. The enduring questions. Despite advances, the core mystery stands untouched. Who entered that house? How were 3 women taken so quietly, so completely? And why, after all this time, has not one definitive trace been found? Detectives still run annual audits of the evidence room, ensuring every artifact from Delmar Street remains preserved. A DNA swab, a hair fragment, a fiber. Any could become the key once technology catches up to fate. The case endures not because it's unsolved, but because it reminds us what human persistence looks like when the world demands surrender. Springfield today. Drive down East Delmar Street now and you'll see freshly painted houses, trimmed lawns, and children riding bicycles. Life moving forward. Most residents know the story, some only vaguely. But at dusk, when porch lights flicker on, a quiet respect lingers in the air. A local florist still leaves 3 white roses each June 7th at the base of the mailbox. No one admits to it, but everyone notices. It's Springfield's unspoken promise. We remember. Legacy in motion. Every generation inherits the story anew. For Springfield's young officers, it's both warning and motivation. For journalists, an ethical compass. For families of the missing, a sign that silence need not mean surrender. Technology continues to evolve. DNA from dust, AI that reconstructs voices, and forensic genealogy that reunites names and remains. Somewhere in those tools lies the potential to close this circle. Until then, their legacy is endurance. A city's refusal to forget and a family's refusal to give up. The Springfield Three may be lost, but they are not gone. They live in every alert, every policy, every parent who checks that the porch light is on and the door is locked. Light that remains. In every story of loss, there's a point when the search becomes something else. It's no longer about finding, it's about carrying. For Springfield, that moment came quietly, somewhere between a prayer and a headline. The passing of time. It's been over 3 decades since Sherrill Levitt, Suzie Streeter, and Stacy McCall vanished. Time has reshaped the landscape. New roads, new homes, and faces that didn't exist when the posters first went up. But the case has not aged. It remains young, suspended in that bright June morning of 1992, forever asking the same question. Where did they go? Inside the police station, the evidence boxes still sit on the same metal shelves, labeled in the same black marker. Files have yellowed, but the ink holds strong, as though the story refuses to fade even on paper. The family's quiet strength. Janice McCall still speaks in the present tense when she mentions her daughter. She tends her garden, keeps fresh flowers on the kitchen table, and continues to attend every memorial service. Not because she expects closure, but because she knows remembrance is a form of justice. If I stop saying her name, she once told a reporter, then she's gone twice. Her grace became the emotional backbone of the story, the mother who would not let the darkness define her daughter's legacy. The investigators' promise. Many detectives have since retired, but their commitment lingers like unfinished business. Some still gather informally at coffee shops, swapping stories of new leads or technological breakthroughs that might one day unlock the truth. A newer generation has taken over, younger, more digitally skilled, but equally humbled by the magnitude of the task. One detective put it simply, "It's not a cold case. It's a sleeping one, and we're still trying to wake it." Modern forensics, a flicker of hope. In recent years, forensic genealogy and AI-assisted profiling have revived dormant investigations once thought impossible to solve. Unidentified remains across Missouri have been matched to missing persons through these new tools. And each new success brings fresh hope that the Springfield Three could be next. DNA preserved from the home even after decades may yet hold a key, waiting for the right technology or the right connection to bring it into focus. Hope, like evidence, doesn't expire, it just changes form. Remembering Sherrill, Suzie, and Stacy. To know their story is to remember who they were before the headlines. Sherrill Levitt, hardworking, meticulous, independent. She loved her home, her salon, and her daughter. Suzie Streeter, spirited, sharp-tongued, and funny. She dreamed of working with animals, of seeing the world beyond Springfield. Stacy McCall, gentle and trusting, the kind of friend who remembered birthdays and made others laugh without trying. Each woman was ordinary in the most beautiful way, and it's that ordinariness that makes their loss echo so deeply. The community vigil. Every June 7th, Springfield gathers quietly at Phelps Grove Park. There's no press release, no major broadcast, just neighbors, candles, and silence. The names are read aloud. The crowd stands still. Some weep. Others close their eyes in prayer. The sound of the evening breeze carries the faint flicker of the candles, fragile but steady. A local pastor speaks every year. Light doesn't forget where it's been. It waits for someone to carry it forward. Reflections on a city changed. The Springfield of today is not the same town that woke to that nightmare in 1992. It's wiser now, more cautious, more connected. People look out for each other. They act faster. The disappearance of 3 women reshaped an entire community's sense of safety and empathy. And though time has weathered the details, the feeling remains. A deep, unspoken vow that no one else should vanish without being found. The human thread. True crime often lives in the shadow of sensationalism, but the Springfield Three remind us what it truly is. A story about people. Their faces, their laughter, their absence. All of it urges us to see the humanity behind the mystery. They remind us that justice is not just about answers. It's about remembering who we are when no one is watching. A message that endures. The lesson of the Springfield Three isn't only for detectives, it's for all of us. To stay alert. To speak when something feels wrong. To care about strangers we'll never meet. The case remains unsolved, but the story has purpose. It continues to save others by keeping our attention alive. And maybe that, in its own quiet way, is what justice sometimes looks like. The light that remains. The porch light at 1717 East Delmar Street is gone now, but others have replaced it. Scattered across Springfield, across America, shining in windows as silent symbols of vigilance and love. Each one says the same thing: we remember you. In the end, it's not the mystery that defines them. It's the light that never went out. Sherrill Levitt, Suzie Streeter, Stacy McCall. 3 women whose story continues to ask us, not what happened, but who we've become since it did. Thank you so much for your time to watch this video to the end. Don't forget to subscribe for more videos.